everybody, Brian Goulet here of GouletPens.com, and it is episode number 207 of Goulet Q&A. It's the first time in a couple of weeks that I've done like a normal Q&A because I've been coming and going and had all this crazy special stuff going on. But I'm here for the next few weeks as normal now, and so here you go, you get me. All right, so just finished the Atlanta trip. If you watched right now on Wednesday, Drew and I recapped it just a little bit, but it was an awesome trip. We have a very entertaining vlog that's going to be coming, and I'm not going to spoil it all, but we do get into a little bit of shenanigans. It's a little more along the style of like the Lamy Germany vlog that I did, where I like catalog my entire journey, except Drew and I were really intentional about like doing transitions and explaining what was going on as we were doing it. So I'm really excited about how it's going to come together. However, it's going to take a few weeks because I have like close to 300 gigs of footage, which for those of you that know gigs, that's a lot of gigs. So I have to go through it all, give it all to Andy. Andy's got to put it all together. It's going to take a little bit of time and thought, and we have a few things going on here, so it might take a little bit, but you know what? It'll be fun whenever we get it out there. So all in all, really good trip. Got to hang out with Mark Bacchus for a day, and then kind of watch him throughout the show. So that was really cool just to get to see how he does nib stuff, because he's got a little bit different approach than Brian Gray has. And we went to go hang out with him in January. So it's interesting getting to talk to different people that do nibs, see how their approach is. Bottom line is it's nothing too magical, but it does require a ton of practice. So it's interesting seeing the different techniques that develop amongst different people. So that was really cool. We got to hang out with people like David Parker, Fig Boot, who we had on here a couple of weeks ago. He's one of the ones that I posted in place of Q&A while I've been gone the last couple of weeks. And then Anna Reinert, Well-Appointed Desk, Brad Dowdy and Mike Hurley from Pen Addict, and Brad from Knock, Jeff Bruckwookie paired up with Brad from Knock, Jonathan Brooks of Carolina Pens, Nick Pang, calligrapher, Ryan Krusak, Pierre Miller of Desert Errata, and many, many other people who are in the pen industry, which is pretty cool. So people that just frankly just love pens. And so getting to be with them in person is really awesome. I'm pretty spoiled because in my workplace, I'm not like the weird pen person that nobody understands. We're all weird pen people here at Goulet, but most of the people who went to the show are like freaking out because they're used to being like the only person that they know in their immediate circles, unless they're able to recruit other people that they know into the fountain pen world. So when all the fountain pen people get together, it's pretty crazy. If you've never been to a show, it's pretty interesting to get to see all the products and stuff like that, but then also to get to hang out with each other. And pretty much it was just go to the show all day, dinner and some mingling and stuff, and then pretty much hang out at the bar until 2 o'clock in the morning or later every night, just talking pens and hanging out with really good people. So really cool. I haven't done a lot of the pen circuit, but I get the appeal. I really do. It was a lot of fun. And I got to bring Drew with me and have some shenanigans, so it should be pretty fun. And then this one little story I'll tell real quick. I met a wonderful lady named Irene. She was just, every time I go to a show, there's usually one person that kind of grabs me, not physically, but like really just touches me. Irene, that was her this time. And she was telling me about how the fact she bought fountain pens 30 years ago, never used them because she was too intimidated by them. I just didn't know how to use them and all that. And, I've run into that situation before with people, and I really try to find a lot of gratification when they tell me like, yeah, they felt that they could. But her story goes even deeper than that. So because of my videos and what the education our team has done here, she felt the confidence to be able to use those pens, and she has struggled with an ongoing, medical condition that has resulted in some depression. And she said through her using fountain pens, she was able to start journaling out her feelings and stuff like that, and basically work her way through her depression. So she got like teary-eyed, and I was like a slobbering mess, and I gave her a hug, just basically to think like, because of what I'm doing here, that I helped someone get out of depression. Like, that's not me taking credit for that, but just for her to tell that whole story for that was pretty cool and very, very touching. So that was really cool. So my takeaways from that is, just you never know who you're going to touch and who you're going to influence when you're doing this kind of stuff. It's really cool. And just the fountain pen community is so tight. It's just such an amazing place to be. It really is. I'm so grateful. I'm very thankful that I get to be doing it full time, because I know a lot of people who are in the pen world and those who are doing shows and stuff, a lot of times it's like, it's like aspirational to be doing it as a full-time gig. A lot of people have day jobs. A lot of people are, doing their pen stuff, especially if they're going to shows and all that. They're trying to figure out how to make it a full-time gig if they can. So I'm just so grateful to have been able to be in the position that I'm in. And then, I had a little bit of humility. So I just like talked to some folks, and, we get a ton of feedback and information through you all, through social media and just all the channels that we normally have about what products we should carry and how you use them and stuff like that. But going to the show, just getting to see stuff in person, I mean, I'm a big advocate of like anytime you can meet in person, talk in person, be in person, you pick up on so much more, especially communicating, yet body language. There's just so much more that you pick up on than you do through online text and stuff like that. Believe me, I'm a huge fan of online, but there's so much that you can miss. So when you're in person, you really pick up on a lot of that. My big thing was a couple of things that were kind of on my radar, but not super heavy, one of which is Retro 51, which I've always kind of written off a little bit as like a rollerball pen, which it is primarily. They have a fountain pen, but anyway, so we've got contacts there, and I've met with them a couple times and just been like, well, we're a fountain pen company, and that's just really our thing, and rollerballs and all that. But this time it was really eye-opening for me and for Drew to really just kind of understand just how avid real fountain pen collectors and users are a fan of the Retro 51 rollerball. And then the fountain pen, I know people aren't involved with the grip and all that kind of stuff. So literally like 2 hours ago, before I'm filming this, I was with the folks at Retro. They actually came to visit us here this week, and so I was talking to them about the grip. And we literally went through like my entire pen collection. I was talking about which grips I like and don't and all this kind of stuff. And they are wanting to make this pen better, the fountain pen. So that's really cool to be so in touch and getting that kind of feedback. And to have a company that wants to do that is pretty cool. And there's all kinds of great retros and stuff like that we're looking at. There's some good ones like the little scripty one here that's like has the directions on how to do cursive. So let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. These are things that we're considering carrying. Again, it's rollerball, so for us it's like, really? But we're trying to gather feedback. I posted on my personal Instagram, got a ton of great feedback, like hundreds of comments about them, and then we talked about them right now, and we're getting a lot of comments as well. So I'm still gaining feedback, about these. Here's this bronze looking one, which is pretty cool. Sorry, copper. It's a brushed copper, which is pretty cool. It's not a solid copper, but it's a copper plating, so it's actually real copper you're touching, which I thought was pretty neat. They have other cool ones like this. This one right here, I think it's called Dr. Gray, and then the elephant and rhino one, which part of the proceeds go towards, helping one of the causes. I don't have it all memorized, but towards helping, like habitats and stuff. So, just interesting stuff. Really, really kind of opened my eyes a little bit towards gaining that feedback. And so we'll see. We'll see about Retro. It's not going to be anything that would be immediate. We're still kind of talking, but the conversation continues. And then another notable thing that we had happen this week is we got delivery of the TWSBI Precision. So the TWSBI Precision is a new TWSBI pen that we have heard about for a while, and you've had a lot of questions about it, and finally got it in. So I wanted to show you a little bit of what it's like. Now, the way that these pens work, it's a new pen that TWSBI's come out with. It's going to be fairly limited stock at the onset until they get their production kind of underway. So I expect these to be gone by the time this video goes up. Pretty much all of them, because I think demand is higher than the numbers that we're going to get. But it's an aluminum pen, and it's got a decent weight to it. It's not super, super heavy because aluminum's a fairly light pen. And it's kind of this brushed, kind of anodized look, and it's pretty cool. It's a gray, like a slate gray. The clip itself, I saw some comments of people thinking like that clip's going to slide right off. Well, it's not like the Kaweco clip where it like slides onto the pen. It's fixed, so I don't think that's going to happen. But it's got its own kind of look. And then it's a piston pen, just like you would expect from TWSBI, because that's pretty much their jam. So there's the piston, it unscrews like that. I haven't measured the ink capacity yet, but I think it's going to be somewhere near the Classic. I don't think it's going to be as much of an ink capacity as the 580, just because the diameter is not quite there. And then the grip is kind of this straight grip instead of taper like you would typically see on the 580 and maybe the Mini. And it's the same size nib, it's number 5 nib as the 580, which I know has generated some questions. Hey, can you swap the grips on the pens and be able to do that? Well, I have not, like, I just got this in my hand like earlier today because I've been really busy and I was gone last week. And so I haven't had a chance to like really get up to speed on everything. So if I take the grips off, technically the housing and stuff threads in, but I'll show you what happens when I go to put it in place. If I take the 580 grip and put it on there, it goes on, but the grip itself is like rattling around. So technically it can fit, but it ends up being kind of weird right there. And then the other one, I don't even think fits on because it's just not, it's not the same diameter on there. So it's not like you can just switch and swap. And if you look up closely on it, you know, comparing the 580 and the precision grip, even though the nib itself and the feed itself is the same, if you look at the grip, you can see that the actual metal grip itself is a different length. And so the housing is a different length. And so it's just not going to, sorry, not the housing, but the overall shroud and everything. Technically, I think if you wanted to just completely disassemble these and then swap them, you could. I think the easiest way, if you wanted to swap them, would be just to yank the nib out and put it into the other housing, which is a total hack. And I think if you mess that up and you tell TWSBI, hey, this is what I was trying to do, they would be like, really? Did you have to do that? So my official recommendation would be to just let it be where it is and not go swapping it apart. But if you want to do it on your own accord, I can't stop you. But please don't email TWSBI and say, Brian said I could swap them, because officially I think the word is that you cannot swap them. So that's where I'm at with that one. But pretty decent pen. And you know, I think for those of you who wanted kind of a metal look or wanted something that looks, you know, very different than that, it's kind of interesting for you. And then the pen does post. It posts, it's got rubber O-rings, sort of like the Classic has on it. So you can post it in kind of whatever orientation you want. And one thing is like, you know, can you unscrew the piston on it? You technically can if you unscrew it like that. You know, it's kind of like the 580 where, you know, you can post it on the back and then actually if you have it down with a decent amount of pressure and you do it, it's really not going to move. Actually, it's going to slide on the O-rings before it unscrews. But if you don't have it tightened down all the way, then when you have it posted, you can actually unscrew the piston and it would dump ink out of the pen. So, you know, just kind of be cognizant of that. I don't think most of you, unless you have, you know, rather large hands, you're probably not going to be super into posting it anyway because it is metal and it's a little long when it's posted, so it'll have a little bit of back weight to it. But to me, it's totally workable. You know, I have large hands, so you know, I don't know using this if I would probably use it unposted actually because it's long enough where I can do that. If I post it, it ends up being a little long, a little bit top heavy. It's really going to be a preferential thing. But anyway, hopefully that helps some of your questions. Hopefully my team can reference this portion of the video and shoot you to it and be able to get you some help there. I know it's hard when you don't get to hold these pens in person to see if it's going to help, but anyway. And then the other thing is I'm kind of waiting for the Lamy All Black. I shot a video for it. I'm not sure if it will have published before Q&A or not. I think we're trying to get it out Thursday. You'll know at the time of seeing this whether we accomplish that or not, but either way, we're going to have the pen fairly soon. And then let me send a super quick message here. Okay. Anywho, sorry about that. Taking care of business, multitasking. Anyway, so Lamy All Black Safari. So I have it. You'll have the video. I actually don't have the pen because Andy was shooting B-roll for the video. So I don't have it physically to show you right now. But either way, you can check that out in comparison to the charcoal. So compared to the charcoal, the shiny black Safari, and the All-Star Black. So that should be pretty worthwhile. I think it's going to be coming maybe the end of next week. I don't have that confirmed, but word on the street is they're in the US and they're getting packaged up, so they should be coming to us relatively soon. So get ready. All right, let's do the questions for this week, shall we? So pen and writing questions. The first one is from Jarrett186 on Instagram. I've seen your videos about how to use Mylar paper, but I would like to know how to smooth an Italic or Stub nib with a Mylar paper. Okay, Italic or Stub nib. I don't know if I have an Italic or Stub nib immediately at my disposal. Let me see if I can grab it. I don't know that I necessarily need one for demonstration purposes. This is what happens when you have too much going on in one day. I don't even have one. How do you like that? I always have a Stub at hand. Well then, I have a Stub right here, but I don't want to pull that thing out for demonstration. Okay, well, I don't have one, and I'm not going to get up, so I can use it, a regular pen for the demonstration. So, Mylar paper. Okay, it's these beautiful white and green sheets, 0.3 and 1 micron, and you can use these to smooth out your fountain pen nib. So this is the 1 micron and this is the 0.3 micron, which is really pretty fine. You can hardly even tell that it's an abrasive, but it is. So if you want to get your nib really smooth, of course you can always use micro mesh, but that's a little much more abrasive. So if you wanted to use a pen such as the Conklin Classics Firelines, which I'll be talking about for another question here in a minute, I find the best way to smooth a stub is actually, sorry, back that up a second. When you're smoothing a stub, the concept is essentially similar to a regular ball nib, fine, medium, broad, that kind of thing. Fine, extra fine, fine, medium, broad, they all have this ball on the end, and it's just kind of a round ball, and it's shaped so that you can write, and it's a little forgiving in terms of its orientation and stuff like that. Less so on a stub, because essentially a stub is like this flattened out, kind of elongated, as opposed to having the tipping that actually touches the page be a ball. The stub or Italic is going to be, like this. Italic would be more crisp on the edges, and then a stub would be a little more rounded. So the problem is when you have a stub and it's, you're writing on the paper like this, if it's touching the paper, say that this is the paper, if it's touching the paper here, it writes fine. If you have it turned a little bit like this, it's not as forgiving because then you write with pressure and it's going to misalign the tines. So that's one thing, is you want to make sure that your nib is in the very proper orientation so that your entire flat part of the stub nib is actually touching the Mylar or the micro mesh. If you have it laying down. Another approach that you can take is actually, and this is something that I've learned through getting a little more kind of nib education from those who actually do it for a living, is instead of holding the paper down and doing all your work on here, which you can, is if you want to have a gentler touch, especially when you get to the point where you have Mylar and whatnot, you can actually have a little bit more of a delicate touch if you hold the nib in your hand, hold the pen in your hand with the nib, the face of the nib down actually, and then you can take your Mylar and actually work it over the nib. You have a little more control in your hand. You're likely going to use less pressure than if you had it on the table and you were writing down with the pen. So that is one technique that can help. And then typically, you want to make sure you have proper alignment, so that's normal, just like you would have it with a regular nib. And then you want to make sure that you are generally smooth, which is where it can help, doing like a figure 8 pattern or just writing in some kind of orientation that's similar to your writing style on a surface like this. The biggest difference is if you have a ball nib, and this is, I'm like struggling to explain this in a very coherent fashion, so kind of roll with me. When you have a ball nib, you don't want to just smooth it in one spot, because then you're going to actually flatten out the ball on the bottom, okay, and that could cause you some more issues. What you want to do is you want to smooth it, and as you're smoothing it, you kind of rotate the pen in your hand a little bit, and then you move it up and down a little bit, just so that you're kind of covering all bases, right? And you don't want to write with a lot of pressure, so you want to smooth it. Sorry, I'm going right to the micro mesh there, but you want to smooth it to pretend like this is the writing surface. You want to smooth it and kind of move it up and down and all around, just like that. And that's going to kind of get the ball smoothed out. When you have a stub, you can't really move it in the rotation from left to right, because then you're going to be like really rounding out one side of the stub. So really there, you're not so much rotating it. You're really just kind of smoothing it back and forth, and then you're just kind of moving it up and down like so. So that can be kind of tough to do without a lot of practice. That's why I typically like to use this stuff in my hand, right? Because then I can just kind of go like this. I can have a little bit of pressure and kind of go like that. And then I'm using way less pressure than I would if I was using it on the table. And then I would go over to the page and try to write it and be like, okay, that looks pretty good. Let me smooth out just a little bit more. Oh, it's catching a little bit going in this direction. Let me try smoothing out this side. and then going back, and then that, you can kind of fine tune it like that. And then, you know, if you do it a lot, like basically if you smooth it too much, then you have say a crisp Italic where you've got a fairly sharp edge, and you smooth it out too much, you're essentially going to kind of turn it into a stub. So you want to make sure the Mylar is not going to do too much damage. The micro mesh, you could actually, you know, if you do it pretty aggressively, could end up really kind of rounding it out. But maybe you have, you know, a really crisp stub or crisp Italic, whatever you want to call it, and you want it to be a lot smoother, you can essentially turn it into a stub. That's what nibmeisters do all the time, is for people. So eventually that's what you'll do. That's as deeply as I think I'm going to explain it, because it's hard to do it without showing it, and I've already, you know, I didn't like super thoroughly step-by-step this whole thing, but that's essentially the concept. So the biggest difference is that you want to go lightly. If you overdo it, you could really kind of smooth the whole thing out and sacrifice some of your line variation. And when you're smoothing it, you don't want to rotate it. You got to be very precise about having that flat part there, and you kind of move it up and down, or just use it with your hand and just kind of go over like this. Okay, and then if you want to knock down those corners, you kind of just go like this and knock over the corners. Having a loop helps tremendously, and you know, using a light touch and then checking it frequently can help tremendously. Think I did enough damage on that question. All right, next one. This is from Granite in an email. What's your take on boxes? I'm speaking specifically about the boxes that bind pens come in, but that could also include ink boxes. Some are really nice, others are pretty basic. Over the years, I've amassed boxes of boxes. Me too. Is there any value in saving them, or are they more trouble than they're worth? I've never sold any of my pens, but if I did, I don't know whether a purchaser would care if it came with the box or not. Guidance, please. Okay, I think in general, yeah, if you have your box for your pen, when you go to resell it, it may be worth a little bit more than it would without a box. Maybe the seller wouldn't care, but the chances are the person that's buying it might care. So in general, if you're really thinking realistically that you're going to sell that pen, keep all the original packaging. That's just my number one rule. If you're like me and you have 100 pens and you really don't have any plans on selling them anytime soon, you may want to consider the storage of your boxes and how necessary that actually is. Like, for example, I have tons of Noodler's pens and tons of Lamy pens. Are those boxes really adding to the value of the pen? Probably not, because they're not particularly nice or valuable boxes. If you have something that's a limited edition and is numbered and has a spectral packaging, then I would probably save them. That's basically what I did. When we got to the point where we had to move, I mean, I had, you know, like those giant, like 18-quart tubs. I had, I think, 6 or 8 of them filled with pen boxes, empty pen boxes. It was getting a little out of control, and Rachel let me know that, and Jen let me know that, and both of them kind of ganged up. And when we went to move our facility, they both were like, "Brian, we are going to throw out some of your boxes." And I was like, okay. I felt like I was on the show Hoarders, where I was like, okay, as long as I can be there, and you just asked me, and I was like all nervous and going through stuff. No, really. Eventually, I think Rachel ended up going through most of them, and we basically kind of came up with some parameters. I was like, if it's something where the box itself is really special, like there's something unique about that box. Like, for example, I still have the original box that the black matte vanishing point came in. It was like this shadow box with like this plastic film, and the pen would sit in the middle of the film and just kind of floated in the box. That's super cool. They haven't had that for like 6 years. So I still have my original box there. I kept that box because the box itself is super cool. All the rest of my vanishing point boxes that are coming out now, they're not that special. They didn't make the cut, so they went. With the exception of, you know, something like the LEs. You know, this is the Vanishing Point LE box from the pink Vanishing Point a number of years ago. That goes to it's actually Rachel's pen. This isn't even mine. But the box itself, it's pink. They only made this box for that limited edition pen. It's cool. Hung on to it. Most of the other ones didn't make the cut. You know, a pen box like the Pilot Custom 912, is it that special? No, not really. This is pretty much what all of the Pilot pens are coming in these days. Do you need to hang on to this? Probably not. but I hung on to one. So basically my parameters were I hold on to it if it was a limited edition that was like numbered, the box itself was really cool or special, or, you know, for me, because I'm a pen reviewer, I held on to essentially an example of one of each type of box. You know, so like I have kind of a generic Pilot box. This is pretty much the only one that I have, like this style, because I just don't need 12 of these like I probably would have if I kept them all. Another one that I would definitely keep would be like, you know, the Luna, Opera Master Luna. Super cool box, has a nice inkwell and everything. If you haven't already seen it, actually, I don't know how much we even really feature this on. I think we feature this on our site because it is special. But it's like, okay, it comes with the box. It's got this whole big presentation with this bag. You open it up, and the box itself is, I don't know how to describe it other than mighty. It is a large box, which then actually is kind of a knock against it if you're talking about storage. It's got this nice debossing in the top, and then you open it up. It's got the pen inside. It's got the card with the number on it. It's got a bottle of ink in here. It's super cool, right? Very intentional that I did hang on to. So these types of things, you just have to make decisions for yourself. But I think ultimately it comes down to, do you feel like it? Because at the end of the day, fountain pens themselves, are they an investment? Yeah, I think you can recoup some of your investment, but really, unless you're buying like very special limited edition kind of things from certain brands that may or may not appreciate in value, pretty much it's just whatever is going to make you happy. And if you are starting to get to the point where you have to have like another room in your house where you need to store your pen boxes, you're probably paying more in additional rent or square footage costs in whatever rent or ownership form or fashion, and heating and cooling and all that of that square footage space than you would gain by storing those boxes. So really just do whatever you want. Ink boxes, you know, I've got bottles of ink. I usually keep all the boxes just because it makes things a little easier, and especially if I'm transporting them, it's just nice. If it has a cardboard box, I'll usually hang on to that. If it's like a clear plastic box, it doesn't really help protect it that much anyway. I don't really need to hang on to that. But usually it's a decent idea to store your ink inside boxes, if for no other reason, just to help UV protect it. The dyes will last a little longer, so it's not a bad idea, unless you just really hate the box and you're just like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna put my Konpeki bottle on the shelf because the bottle looks gorgeous, and I like to shoot, you know, videos and have people look at the bottle. Maybe I'll do that. And so I don't know where that Konpeki box is, so it may be gone. So I'm not super picky about ink boxes. They're not as big of a pain to me. You know, I have a bookshelf that has a lot of ink, and it's fairly manageable unless you get to the point where it's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bottles. But the problem is if you don't store them in boxes, then they get a little hard to control. They get a little hard to store, and the glass can knock into each other. So generally ink boxes, I say hang on to them unless you just hate them and you just want to throw the ink on the shelf. There you go. I'm really curious to know, do they actually matter to you though? So leave something in the comments, and I'm curious to hear. All right, next question is from Dale M on Facebook. I have a couple of vintage pens, a 1920s Mabie Todd and a 1950s Waterman. I'll only use black, blue, or blue-black in these, as that was all there was back then. Can you recommend a modern pen that has the feel of the old BCHR and Ebonite pens that I can whack modern nibs, whack modern inks into? BCHR stands for black chased hard rubber. If I had more time or knew more about vintage, I would have researched that deeper. It was hard to find any information about that, honestly. But you vintage folks may know a little bit more. But from what I understand, it's somewhat similar to Ebonite. It's like a hard rubber. But anyway, so I have a vintage Waterman pen here. This is a Waterman Ideal Pink. For those of you who are Waterman fans, you know this is a fairly legit Waterman pen. And it's an Ebonite pen. Feels pretty cool. You know, it's rubber, so it's got a little grab to it, and that's pretty cool. So they don't make a ton of pens out of these types of materials anymore, but that's okay. So I will recommend a modern pen that has that, but before I do, you know, talking about like, you know, black, blue, or blue-black ink, I don't know that it's necessarily so much about the color of ink, it's more about the properties and stuff like that that were used back then versus now. Certainly now there are more boutique ink makers that make ink properties that kind of push the limits. I don't know enough about vintage ink chemistry to know exactly what makes modern ink different than vintage ink. that is something where my knowledge just drops off a cliff. So even me being immersed in this for the last 9 years, there are things of which I remain rather ignorant, and this is one that is exposed brightly. So that I don't know, but I don't believe that it's necessarily the color of the ink that matters. It's more about the formulation of the ink. So I would say in general, don't necessarily be so worried about the black, blue, or blue-black ink. I think that just the dye formulations back then were not diverse enough, or it was just not standard in practice to use anything other than those colors. Now I think there are some safe options in other colors if you wanted to go nuts, but by all means, if what you've been doing has been working for you so far, don't feel the need to take the risk on these particular pens if you're not so inclined. But I think that if you're going with an ink that's more or less made from a pen manufacturer, you're probably going to be generally pretty safe, because they usually make those inks to be fairly safe for their own pens. Chances are it's going to be fairly safe for yours. Usually the boutique ink companies are ones that do some more interesting things, shimmer and glitter and sheen and all that kind of stuff, pigmentation and stuff like that. So, being generally pretty knowledgeable, do your little research and understand from other vintage folks what's generally safest. If you're like, nope, I'll only use Waterman blue black, great, go nuts, do you. Get a newer pen and throw whatever the heck kind of crazy ink you want in there, because those are more or less replaceable, whereas maybe a 1920s Mabie Todd, you can't really find those every day necessarily, and they're not making any more of them. So that's crazy to think about. 1920s, that's almost 100 years old. Almost 100 years old. That's really kind of crazy. What else do you have that's 100 years old that you can use on a daily basis? Maybe a cast iron skillet? I don't know. So, newer stuff, there are a few Ebonite pens out there. We don't have a ton of them on our site on Goulet Pens. There's a couple, one of which is a current special edition that we have, which is the Conklin Classic. And I pulled this out because it's definitely no Waterman ideal, but it's a red Ebonite that's not the furthest thing away from a modern replacement of a vintage Ebonite pen. Of course, the pen itself is rather different, but anyway, and it's something that we helped develop. We called it the Classic because it was designed to be kind of more of a throwback of a vintage thing. So that's a Goulet exclusive that we have. The only other Ebonite pens that we even have currently there's a couple of Noodler's Ebonite pens, and then the basically Namiki pens. Sometimes have an Ebonite base on them. A lot of them have Urushi lacquer over top. So that's really pretty much all I have. There are some other Ebonite pens that are floating around out there, of which I'm failing to recall. I tried to think through last night. I was like, what are other Ebonite pens? And I was already up until 2 o'clock. Not 2 o'clock. I was up until 1 o'clock in the morning. I went to bed too late last night. And it was just getting too late, so I didn't bother researching it any deeper. But there's more regularly, there's not a ton of regularly offered Ebonite pens, but there are some. Oftentimes they become special editions or limited editions and stuff, just because there's really not many people making Ebonite right now, in the entire world. That's one thing, talking to different pen manufacturers, they're literally like, we can't find Ebonite, or it's really expensive, and we can only do it in a limited run. So that's why you don't see them as readily available anymore. But the end of an era, I guess. All right, let's talk about ink, shall we? This is oatmealandcambria on Instagram. Does Goulet Pens have any exclusive inks in the works? I love Liberty's Elysium, but it's been years since its release. That was in 2012, 6 years ago. I've recently purchased exclusive Diamine and Robert Oster inks from other retailers, and it got me thinking about the mighty Goulets. You offer several exclusive pens, but are there any additional inks on the horizon? Thanks. It has been years. It really has. This is going to be a very short answer. Honestly, I don't have anything in the works right now. I really should. Kind of ashamed of that. I really should be focusing more on exclusive inks, and I just don't have any. So what should we do? Tell me. I need to know, and I'll try and make it happen if I can. Boom. Business question. Pansori78 on Instagram. During a recent Right Now, you mentioned that it was an exciting and crazy time for the company when the Dark Lilac came out. This would be the Lamy Safari Dark Lilac of 2016. I was just wondering what was going on that made it such a memorable moment. Well, any special edition like that is going to be a really busy time for us because, there's a lot of build up, a lot of people know it's coming, and so there's a lot of buzz around it. My team gets a lot of questions about it. I get a lot of questions about it. It's usually in conversation. We usually have some kind of just a general build up in the community of excitement around special editions, limited editions that are highly anticipated. And because the Safari itself is such a relatively affordable pen and is such a great pen for newbies and some experienced folk alike, it usually ends up being a very accessible pen for a lot of people. So there's a lot of people it's very hot on their radar when that pen is going to announce. So even no matter what color, no matter what style, whether it's like a Safari or All-Star or whatever, there's usually a bit of buzz going on around that at the time of its release. So that's one part of it. The pens were set to arrive ahead of time, but we had a freight shipment because we'd ordered a lot because we'd been waiting for a purple Safari forever, and when we knew that it came out, we ordered up a lot. So it was a large order. We had not had experience in freight shipments of Lamy pens before that, I believe. You have to hit kind of a certain threshold where you have a freight shipment. And granted, this was the old distributor Readyform, which was based out of Texas at the time, and we are in Virginia. So freight shipping a large order of pens halfway across the country was just something that we had not experienced before. So they gave us a timeline. The communication channel for a freight shipment is very different than it is for a kind of a regular ground shipment. And so we, didn't get as much communication as we were normally used to because it went through a different kind of process, I guess. And so days went by, other people who had ordered it and got their shipments by ground started to get the pens, and they started to list, and they were going online. And so they were starting to sell, and all of our customers were like, what the heck? Where are our pens? And we were like, we ordered up so that we could have a lot. And because we ordered up and got a lot, the shipment got delayed, and we essentially got punished for trying to be more proactive and get more stock. And we were like, blah, this is not ideal. So it was like coming towards the end of the week when everybody else had already launched them, and we were like, okay, they're gonna be delivered, whatever. And then Friday rolls around and they weren't delivered, and we were like, what is happening? And so we called up FedEx and all that kind of stuff. Apparently what ended up happening is they were supposed to put it onto a train that was coming across or something like that, and they just forgot to put it on the train, just missed it. So it was like sitting on some train dock somewhere, and we were just like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. So the weekend rolls around, they get it back onto the train, and then it comes, and it got rather dramatic because you can tell this is all very fresh in my mind. We had planned for an off-site leadership training for our entire leadership team. We never know when the Lamy stuff is going to drop exactly. So we had planned this thing, we booked it. It was going to be 3 hours away. It was like a entree leadership, a Dave Ramsey event, which we were doing a lot of Dave Ramsey stuff at the time. And it was a one-day event. We were going to take our whole leadership team, go to this seminar, and drive back, which was like 3 hours each way, kind of an exhausting trip, but that's what we were going to do. And basically it got to the point, because that freight shipment got so delayed, we were supposed to do that one-day training, which there was only like 1 day of the whole tour that they were doing where it was even like near us on the East Coast, and it was in North Carolina, and that was the day. So that was that Tuesday. So as soon as we got word that it didn't come on that Friday, we were like, you gotta be kidding me. We were like, okay, if it ends up coming on Monday, do we launch it on Monday and then still go to the training on Tuesday? What do we do? But at this point, like every other retailer had it, it was selling. Our customers were asking us constantly, like, why don't you have it? Why does everybody else? We want to buy it. I can't wait any longer. I already bought it here. And we're just like, you gotta be kidding me. So eventually it got to the point where it became clear that it wasn't going to arrive on Monday either. And we thought it was going to come on Tuesday. We were like, do we wait and do we still go to the training? Do we wait until it comes after Tuesday? And eventually we were like, this is getting too stressful. So we canceled the going to the event. We said we can't have our entire leadership team going as this, one of the most major launches that we've ever had, because we've been waiting on a Purple Safari. There was tons of hype. We can't have one of those major launches that we've ever had and have none of our leadership here. So we just canceled it, and we said we're going to be here. And that actually ended up being the day they arrived, and that ended up being the day that they launched. We had some drama. We didn't get enough ink. It sold out immediately. It was crazy. It was frantic, and it ended up being our highest sales date up to that point that we'd ever had in the company. So I think we made the right call by adjusting everything, but that's what ended up happening. Of course, when we sold out of the ink, then there were a bunch of people that were upset and they missed out, and yada yada yada. So the rest of the story there. But we needed all hands on deck in order to make that happen. So usually when there's a huge special release like that of a major brand that launches something once a year, it's a really exciting / stressful time for us because the demand and everything is so high that we need everybody on board to go. And we had website issues and stuff on top of everything. So it was very frantic. We need everybody kind of figuring out how to best serve you all as customers during these crazy times. But yeah, that's kind of the story. So I don't think we're going to run into that much drama with the all black that's about to launch, especially because there's no ink to go along with it. I mean, there's black ink, but it's not a different black. It's the same black ink they've always had. And I think we've prepared, and we're kind of ready for whenever. We just still don't know exactly when it's going to drop. But that's probably the most stressful thing is, even up to this point, we don't know when it's going to arrive. Hopefully we'll get a notice like when it ships to say it's probably going to be here in a couple of days. Sometimes we don't though. Sometimes it just shows up. That's just kind of how it goes in the retail biz. But that's where we're at. So, we'll get ready for another bit of excitement here with the all black, but I don't think anything will top that dark lilac in the near future. All right, this next question is actually another one from Oatmeal and Cambria. You got 2 of them in this week. From Instagram, has Goulet considered a brand story page for the website? You offer many amazing tools like Nibnook, Swab Shop, etc. How about a page listing each brand's info, founders and founding date, notable achievements and innovations, and what they're known for? Brand story pages are common amongst premium electronics. How about amongst premium pens? It can help users feel more attachment and loyalty to the instruments. I think that's a really interesting idea. In fact, we've kind of thought about doing that at multiple points in the past and just kind of never came together for us. I really like that idea though, quite frankly, and I'm gonna see what we can do. It's no small task because there's a lot of information to gather together and it requires like custom stuff on our site, but I'm very intrigued by that. So I like the concept. I don't have a lot to like elaborate on in this Q&A, but part of it is I want to kind of crowdsource a little bit and get some input from you all in the comments and just ask, what are some specific sites that do this really well? Not even necessarily pen related, but just you mentioned like premium electronics or whatever, just so I can kind of get an idea. Because we have a lot of different brands, and putting stuff together like this would be a little bit of work, but I do think it would be super valuable. So I'm very interested to see who's doing this well. So if you know of anybody who's doing this well, just go ahead and leave a link to them or mention their name or something in the comments, and I would love to know and kind of check them out and find a little inspiration. So thank you for that suggestion. I don't have anything to deliver to you at this point, but you've sparked some interest in me on that one. And then last question for this week. This is going to be a personal one from Michael W. in email. Michael asked me, how has your taste in fountain pens changed over time? And have you retained your appreciation for your first loves? I thought that was an interesting take on the question. I've answered variations of this question before, but the first loves thing kind of caught me. I really started out loving shading inks, really deep blue inks as well, and stub nibs. And those things were really kind of what got me. And I've always loved smooth paper. That has not changed. And I still love all these things. I think on some level, I have a lot of similar kind of interest and passion towards the things that were very much first appealing to me when I got into fountain pens. Smooth flowing inks, a lot of shading, deep saturated color, that kind of stuff. Of course, sheen, I didn't know that. High sheening inks were good, and like that kind of stuff. I didn't know that was as much of a thing early on, but as soon as I discovered it, I found it really appealing, and I still do. So in that way, yes, I do still love all that. Day to day, I would say I use more fine nibs than I used to. As kind of a carry around. My daily carry that I keep in my pocket with me is a Homo sapiens with a fine nib. And it's been that way for the last couple of years, you know, because it was an all-around pen. I like that one, but I always keep a multitude of pens nearby with me. You know, my Conklin Classic here, I have a broad nib. You know, I'll have stub nib. You see earlier, I was struggling to find a stub at the ready. I think I've got a lot of them scattered and put away right now. But I don't, I do have, okay, so I do have a parallel here that's inked up. So I do have that as kind of a stub. That's a little different though. So yeah, I do use somewhat finer nibs. My price threshold has gone up quite a bit. In the early days, I had no money. I had a new baby business that I was trying to get off the ground. I wasn't even drawing a paycheck for myself in the early, when I first got into fountain pens. So yeah, I was not even considering pens like a Homo sapiens or even a, you know, even a Conklin for that matter. I was, even a TWSBI would have been a stretch for me at the time. I was pretty much sticking to things like Kaweco Classic Sport. Alami Joy was one of the first pens I had. Pelican Script. You know, pens that are in like the $10 to $30 range was pretty much pushing my limit at that time. I think I was limited more by my budget than I was by my interests. So if you consider, you know, my taste in fountain pens, it wasn't so much my taste, it's just I could not afford to taste anything more expensive. But then, you know, if I look back, not quite all the way back to the beginning, but maybe a year later after I got into pens, I started to get into things like the Custom 74 from Pilot, the Lamy 2000, Vanishing Point, that kind of stuff. You know, the entry-level gold nibs, I still love those. I still use a Lamy 2000 on almost a daily basis as my journaling pen next to my bed. So I definitely have an affinity towards a lot of the pens that I use early on. You know, things like the Pelican Script, not so much anymore. Lamy Joy, never really loved that one, even when I first started using it. Kaweco Classic Sport, I don't use so much anymore. You know, I'm not as much into the small pocket pens. Generally speaking, I like to use larger pens because I have large hands. So, you know, some of that is like I have developed in that way. You know, a lot of larger pens just end up costing more. So it was a little bit further into my fountain pen career, if you will, before I really kind of developed an affinity for larger pens, just because I frankly just didn't have access to a lot of them or couldn't afford them. So. But, you know, it's interesting, as I reflected on this more, I did start out kind of in acquisition mode, even from the very beginning. You know, I was using fountain pens, like the first fountain pen order, because I wasn't even selling fountain pens at the time. The first order that I ever placed was from another retailer, and I ordered like a clear Kaweco Classic Sport with a fine nib. I ordered a Lamy Joy with a 1.1. I ordered a Pilot Petite 1, you know, little pocket pen. I ordered a Pelican Script with a 1.0. I guess those nibs are not so all over the place, but I tried to get a variety of kind of experiences, and then of course inks were all over the place. So I think from the very beginning for me, my fountain pen journey has been about exploring as much about the fountain pen world as possible. You know, and yes, I do have some of my preferences in terms of nib sizes or types of pens or ink or whatever, but still I'm very much an exploratory person. Literally today, the TWSBI Precision arrived, and I was like, well, it's a new model of TWSBI pen, so of course I have to have it in my collection because I need to be educated and be able to whip it out on any given notice to show you all, because we're going to get some obscure question about it, and I'll be like, oh, they've already all sold out? Well, that's okay. I have one, so let me be able to answer that question for you, customer care team. You know, so a pen like this, it was like, what nib size? You know, whenever I tell my team, like, okay, hold one of these back for me, they're like, what's nib size? And I was like, what do I not already have? That's immediately what I'm thinking about. And I was like, medium nib. I have not gone with a medium nib in a long time. I think I pretty well have the TWSBI nibs covered at this point, but still, it wasn't like, oh, you know, I always get a fine, or I'm always getting a 1.1. No, it's literally like, what do I not have? Let's go with medium. I try to get diversity, and I've stuck with that. I do get a little bit of into collecting. That I wasn't really into in the beginning because it just wasn't even like on thing. It wasn't on my radar. But now I'm at the point where it's like, whether it's TWSBI or, you know, Lamy especially, you know, it's things like that there's a, you know, kind of a regular pen that'll come out, and it's just different colors. It's kind of like, all right, just go ahead and add that one in. You know, especially Lamy pens. I've definitely become a collector of those. And you know, certain special edition Pelicans and stuff like that. Pretty much if it's a blue Pelican, I'm going to fall prey to that one. So there you go. So I still love all my first gold nib ones, as I mentioned. Largely, though, I do still enjoy the types of pens that I was using in the early days. I would definitely have expanded my collection quite a bit. but it's not like a lot of the pens I was using in the early days I've completely dropped off. Some have, some I still really love, but really it's just I've expanded my palette, I've expanded my knowledge and experience, and I still enjoy pretty much freaking all of it. I just love pens so much. What can I say? All right, that wraps it up for this week. As we close it out, the question of the week for me is going to be about pen boxes, okay? And I'm going to go a little deeper than I went into here. So my question, actually a couple of different questions for you about pen boxes. And this is important information here because I get questions about this from manufacturers. How important are boxes? What kind of boxes should we do? Sometimes I get questions about whether they should do one box or another when they come out with a pen. Because oftentimes it's not necessarily even up to the manufacturer what boxes they do. The packaging is oftentimes left up to local distributors. So like the US distributor might do a different packaging for a certain type of pen than say, somebody in Europe or in Asia. Usually it's with like regular edition stuff. Special edition, limited edition things, that's usually like determined at the manufacturer because it's such limited, but ongoing regular stuff, that's why you see so many different types of packaging out there, is because it's usually left up to the distributor to figure that out. So with that in mind, since I have close relationships with a lot of our distributors here, sometimes I get questions about packaging, and the more information you put into my brain, then the better feedback that I can pass up to them and get you a more accurate product that you would like. So my question for you, very long setup to the questions. What are your expectations for pen boxes? Do you find that you expect a nice box when you spend more on a pen? Or if you knew that there was a portion of the pen that could be either come down in price or be made better by having a lesser quality box, would you prefer that? And then what do you do with your pen boxes after you get them? I'm just curious to know. Are you like me? Do you just kind of like hoard them and store them in a bin and fill up an entire closet before you eventually purge them 7 years later? Or do you immediately get your box and you're like, oh, that's nice, and then you just toss it? I thought about actually tossing it, but then I see there's a glass framed picture back there, and before I let it go, I was like, huh, that might be a terrible idea. Anyway, let me know what you do with your boxes. I'm curious to know, and I would love to pass that feedback up to manufacturers to know, do boxes actually matter? My theory is that boxes matter to you upon initial impression. After that, they don't really matter that much, because that's kind of how it is with me. When I get a box, I'm like, oh, this is a nice box. Yeah, this is a quality pen. And that's it. That's about as far as you ever care about that box, which for manufacturers is they understand it, but it's also pretty frustrating because they know that they should put more of their time and effort into the pen, which is the thing you're going to be touching and holding and using for the rest of your life, perhaps. And they know that the boxes don't really matter that much, except the box will give you an impression for that pen at the onset. It's like when you want to make a first impression, it's really important. So I'm curious. Let's talk about that. Give me some feedback in the comments. I would love to discuss and hear what you think. That's it for this week. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and a great rest of your week. You can check out a lot of the products that I talked about here on GouletPens.com. I give you a lot of homework on this one, a lot of comments to leave and stuff to talk about. So if you're listening on the audio podcast, if you could jump on the YouTube video or on Facebook or on our blog or shoot an email, whatever, smoke signal, whatever you can do. I'm just kidding. Don't do smoke signal. I can't read those. But if you get us any type of feedback, it would be greatly appreciated because we are here for you. And I'm going to keep doing this thing as long as y'all keep asking questions. I'll keep answering them. So thanks so much for watching, and right on.